Welcome back. This is the creative side of week 28. So like I've told you before, my mission, you guys, is to try and find meaningful, memorable, and simple ways for you to teach the gospel to your own families or to the classes that you teach. And honestly, a big part of my goal is to find ways to help teenagers teach other teenagers, or missionaries teach other people their age. And I hope to give you the creative tools to pull that off. So I've got 3 really good ones up my sleeve this week. I think it's going to be a very exciting week of study. So let me walk you through the supplies you're going to need for each one. And then once we have that established, I'll take you through each object lesson individually so that you might figure out how you could adapt it to your particular situation. Whatever age kids you're teaching or however many kids are in the classroom, you'll have some options to figure that out. Okay, here we go. The first one. This is the fire. If you've been in my course for a long time, you know that my kids and I have a deep love of teaching scriptures with fire, and this one's no exception. So you need, for this one, some sparklers. Nothing too giant or fancy. I'm hoping they'll all be on clearance since we're just past the 4th of July. If you're not in the United States, I know many of you are global. Hopefully you can find some somewhere close by. But you need some sparklers, nothing too big or too fancy. And then you need some easy peel oranges. So like a mandarin orange, a clementine, a cutie, something that's got a really loose, thin skin will do the trick. These tiny ones are perfect. Okay. Second one, we're going to talk about personal apostasy, what it is and how risky it is and what happens when that occurs in this week's study. Because those Nephites, well, they're kind of a hybrid, right? They're Nephites who left the Nephites and joined with the Lamanites and now become these like contention drivers. The Ammonites and the Amalekites, they just stir the pot and they end up suffering immensely because of their choices. They lose battle after battle and it's hard. So to teach this to your kids, you're going to do a soda can crush experiment. So you need some empty soda cans, you guys. Just grab whatever you have on hand, let your kids have a delicious soda, and then hold on to the cans. And then you're going to need a bowl of ice, well, ice water, I should say, and then a pair of tongs. And this one you're going to have to do in a kitchen setting, unless you have like a portable burner, like a campfire one that you could take somewhere. If you have like a burner that you would take camping, you don't necessarily need a flame, so you kind of do it in a church setting if you have one that has no flame. If not, if you're in a normal house, you could do this just next to your stove. So you need a medium-sized pot, a couple cans, a bowl of ice water, and some tongs, and you'll be good to go. Okay, third one. This is talking about this incredible verse where Ammon talks about how he's not glorying in his own strength. He's glorying in the strength of the Lord. That it's the Lord that's done this miraculous change in the hearts of these Lamanites, and he just rejoices in it. And because of his words, I found myself repeatedly going back to the words of our president of the Relief Society, Camille Johnson, because she essentially is trying to do this around the world. What you see with ALMA and the Sons of Mosiah as they're seeking to care for those who are struggling in spiritual ways and in physical ways is to offer relief. And they do it beautifully. And I kept thinking back to what President Johnson teaches about how Jesus Christ is relief. So we're going to tie what Ammon and his brothers do to what happens with relief workers in a disaster zone. So if you've ever seen like first aid workers in a war zone or after an earthquake or something, that they set up a tent somewhere in the center and then they bring people in to offer relief. And we're going to give you some supplies so that you can kind of play out that analogy. So the first one is a relief worker armband. So kind of like what you would see on somebody who's part of that team, like a Red Cross team, you'd see an armband on their arm to show that they aren't playing sides here. They just want to offer help. So I've got armbands that have cool QR codes to take you to President Johnson's messages. And then I also created a bandaid box. So basically the idea here is you would stuff these with band-aids and teach your kids, or maybe your ministering families that you're going to, teach them about how Jesus Christ is relief and what we are asked to do as part of his relief worker team. And so we'll talk through all that in just a second. For this one, you simply need band-aids. I just use the standard 3-inch size, but anything smaller than 3 inches would work. And then you also need some cardstock for the printable, and then you'll be all set. Okay, that's your supplies list. Now let's get into the details. You guys know me by now. Some of you have been with me for 5 years, and you know how much I love my fire object lessons. So this is a new one for you, and trust me, your kids are going to love it. Okay, so like I talked about, this is to help you understand the sacrifice of those Anti-Nephi-Lehites on the battlefield. When they choose to lay down, they come out without weapons, and it says they prostrate themselves on the ground, meaning they lay down in front of their enemies and let them cause harm. They cause death to 1,005 of them, and they do it to change the hearts of the Lamanites. I think their motive is simply because they love God and they love their fellow men. They love their brethren. These are their people. These are both groups of Lamanites, and they love them, and they don't want them to stain their swords anymore, the same way they have chosen not to stain their swords. And the way they do that in this moment is to lay down, and they die in that moment. What's powerful to me about their offering is what happens in the verses. When you look in the verses, you see that those who did the killing, those who killed these men who were laying on the ground in prayer, pleading to God, praising God in this moment at the end of their life, their hearts change. They really can't not change. I don't know how you could harden in that moment. They are so softened by this sacrifice that they also set down their weapons. Not everybody, but a large portion, thousands of people, their hearts change on the battlefield. These are hardened warrior Lamanites who soften because of the sacrifice that is in front of them. It's this beautiful Christ-like gesture that these Anti-Nephi-Lehites offer. And I wanted some way to showcase their story. And I don't mean that in any kind of irreverent way, but I want to teach my kids the power of sometimes when hard things happen to good people, it's so that the works of God can be manifest in them. It doesn't always have to end in death. Sometimes it's a disability that people wrestle with or struggles that they have that then they share with others and become like this inspiration story, right? That's kind of what we're going to demonstrate. So to do that, this is where the oranges come in. So you need to find easy peel oranges, like we talked about. You don't need to do anything special to them. You're just going to take a sparkler. We actually found it works a little bit better if we used 2 sparklers, but that's probably because our sparklers were kind of the cheap kind. I didn't buy anything fancy. So if you have a thick sparkler, you probably just need 1, but ours were a little scrawny, so we ended up using 2. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to make this orange glow from within. Because what's cool about a sparkler is that it doesn't need oxygen to keep the fire going like a normal fire does. It's so hot that it will keep going even when you think it should be smothered. And so you're going to stick these sparklers into your orange. What we did is we just aimed for the little spot on the top of the orange where there's already kind of a divot, and you push your sparkler through. The safest way we found is to do this. For us, we did it on our kitchen counter because sparklers aren't allowed outside in our neighborhood. It's too fire prone up here. So we did this on our kitchen counter. So I put a big cutting board out. Really, we didn't have sparks going too far, but I had a fire blanket nearby, and we kept trying to tell Violet to pull her hair back just in case. But you're going to have this orange on a plate. You're going to press your 2 sparklers into the center. And then you're going to light it from the very top. So normally when you light a sparkler, you light this rounded edge and you let the flame travel down. This time you're going to light the other end and light it and let the flame go down into the orange. And what you'll see really fast is that when that flame goes through the orange peel and you'd think it would go out, it stays lit. You can't look away. It glows it looks like a jack-o'-lantern on Halloween. It's amazing to me. You see the flame hold itself inside. It doesn't last forever. That flame does go out. But because of what you see, you're dazzled. And I think that's what happens to these warriors on the battlefield. For that moment when these Anti-Nephi-Lehites should have been afraid, and they should have been pleading for their life, and they should have been running the other direction, instead, they take the fire that comes at them. They take these swords. They receive all the awfulness that the Lamanites intended to give them, and they just take it. And in that moment, they glow. And the Lamanites who have come in aggression against them, they don't know what to think of what they're seeing in front of them. And when they see this glow, they change. Their hearts change. What I think is kind of powerful about this object lesson is you can now open up the orange, right? You can show that there is damage inside. This orange, in fact, what was weird about it is once we peeled it, it's not wet anymore. It's dried out on the inside. There's burning that happens right in the center. And you can talk about the sacrifice of these 1,005. That 1,005 fathers or husbands or sons gave their lives on this battlefield so that everybody else back at home could be safer. So that all these brethren who were coming to attack them, their hearts could change and they could be converted to Christ. And what I love is how Ammon and the sons of Mosiah described them. That these 1,005, nobody's worried about their soul. They were all righteous. And when they died, they are going to be carried up by God. That's the promise. So I think you want to talk through that. If you have an example of somebody in your life who's dealt with something really hard, who is an incredibly good person and has something really hard to wrestle with, I would talk about it like this orange, that it is the reason their story inspires so many is because they are glowing. They are taking their difficult circumstances and they are choosing to let something burn bright inside of them, and it draws the eyes of everybody around them. So I hope you can testify of somebody that you know and talk about the story of the Anti-Nephi-Lehites and see the miracles of God that are right at your fingertips. The other thing I would tell you is if oranges aren't in season wherever you are on the globe, where you can't get a hold of them, you can actually do this exact same thing with an egg. Just if you're doing the egg version, I would tell you for sure go outside. You're gonna want to go in a well-ventilated area because the egg kind of has a cooked egg sort of smell, and it's not my favorite. So to do the egg version, you basically just want to, almost like you were gonna blow an egg. Have you ever done that for Easter? Where you like tap a hole in the top and the bottom of the egg with like a thumbtack, and then you would normally blow the yolk out. That's kind of what you're doing, but you're doing it with fire instead. So for this one, if you have the egg and you get those two holes at the top and the bottom, you don't need to blow the yolk out. You're just going to slide your sparkler in. You just want to be careful that you're sliding the wire end of your sparkler in first so that you don't get everything wet up here. Ideally, some of the sparkler will still be dry here on the tip. So you're going to slide that into your egg. You take it outside. For us, we did 2 sparklers. And what's cool about the egg version is it actually burns longer than the orange version. It just has kind of a gross smell, and the yolk shoots out of the side. So it's a little messier, but definitely cooler. So you can teach the exact same lesson with an egg. In fact, a couple of times we did it. I didn't capture it on film, but when Violet did it, we could actually get the sparkler flame to travel all the way through the egg and come out the other side. So if you have a long enough sparkler, you can make that happen. I'm telling you, there's something about this object lesson that will catch your kid's eye. I promise. The beautiful thing about this week's chapters is so many hearts change. So many Lamanite hearts change and convert and become part of the people of God, that full love God. But there are some who don't. In particular, there's 2 groups, the Amalekites and the Ammonites. These are people who used to be Nephites, who let their belief in the covenant go, who let their understanding of God go, who set down all their righteous traditions and picked up wicked traditions, and they are hard. In fact, over and over again this week, they will suffer losses. They'll lose in battles repeatedly, and they just won't change. And because God is God, He doesn't force them to change. He simply gives them many opportunities to hear truth and react to it. What's different about them is they knew something and they choose not to follow it. So, for example, this is how Mormon phrased it. He taught that those who were once enlightened by the Spirit of God, who fall into sin and transgression, become more hardened. Then he also taught that their state becomes worse than as though they had never known these things. I think the reason it's worse is because this is no longer just a weakness. This is rebellion. When you know truth and you know the goodness of God and you know the light of the covenant and you turn against it deliberately and try to keep others from it, that's rebellion. And that's why there is a dramatic difference in what happens to you next. When it comes to these particular pockets of the Lamanites or Nephites who became Lamanites, they struggle. Like they're going to have failure after failure this week because they're fighting against the people of God. So they will lose on the battlefield and they'll have massive losses. Even part of the chapter talks about, I can't remember which chapter, but how the widows are mourning and the fathers are mourning and the sisters are mourning, like because there are so many losses and they simply won't turn their hearts. So I wanted to take time this week to talk about what personal apostasy is. How did they get here? And how can we avoid this situation in ourselves? And that's where the soda can crush comes in. Because essentially what you're going to do is you're going to crush this can in a really cool way. But the only reason it crushes is because there's a little bit of water left inside. So before you get into the actual crushing, first I want to teach your kids about what personal apostasy is. Because there's a new document that I found as I was searching online for good resources. This comes from the church website. It's President Oak speaking. It's this year. I can't remember the title of it, but it's in the notes. And he basically teaches the definition of personal apostasy. This is what he said. Apostasy refers to a person's abandonment of the most fundamental, most basic religious beliefs, such as a belief in God or the restoration of priesthood authority. I do think you want to say that up front, because I don't think it's wrong to have questions, to even have doubts. I mean, I certainly don't think we're commanded to doubt not, right? There's a lot of ways you can use your doubts to fuel your faith. I think you can use it to ask good questions and to study the scriptures and to wrestle for understanding and to take hold of your testimony, like President Nelson taught us. It's not wrong to be wrestling. What's wrong is if we let that go so far, like these Ammonites did. They never turn, despite the Lord's repeated outstretched arm towards them and the losses they incur. They just will not turn. So I would guide you to President Oaks first. Then I would go to Elder Pace. So he's the Sunday School General President, and he was teaching in our last conference about how studying the scriptures is actually a guard against personal apostasy. He said this: while God has promised that there will never be another general apostasy, we need to be mindful and careful to avoid a personal apostasy. Remembering, as President Russell M. Nelson has taught, we are each responsible for our individual spiritual growth. Studying the Book of Mormon, as we're doing this year, always brings us closer to the Savior and helps us stay close to him. So this is when, now you've set the stage and helped your kids understand, now it's time to do the cool stuff. So you're going to grab an empty can of soda. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're all basically made of the same material. Any can, I think, will work. You're going to fill this up with water and talk about, at one time, these people were Nephites, and they had connections to the covenant, and they had light and understanding. And then over the course of time, they let that go. And this is when you kind of pour out that testimony, pour out the water. You just want to leave a little bit behind, maybe like a tablespoon or two behind. You can kind of shake it and get a feel for it. It doesn't have to be exactly measured, but you want a little bit left behind, because that's essentially what Mormon was teaching us, that those who had light and now reject or rebel against it, they are actually worse off than if they had never heard of the church at all. And that's what we're demonstrating with the can. So if there's a little bit of water left in here, you're going to set this into a hot pot. Basically, I put a medium-sized pot on our stove and put it on medium-high heat and let it heat up while I was filling the soda can and pouring it out a little bit. And then I just set my can right on top. Obviously, since you're dealing with a lot of heat, I would either do this with, oven mitts or tongs. Certainly, I would recommend no children doing this one. You'd want to demonstrate it for the kids, but you're going to put that on the pot, and that's going to heat up that water inside. After maybe a minute or 2 minutes, you'll start to hear little bubbles, almost like that water inside is just beginning to boil. And then if you watch, you'll start to see steam shooting out of the opening in the can. That's when you know things are ready. So before you did any of this, I hope you set a bowl of ice water next to your pot, because that's where you're going to use it. So you're going to take your tongs and you're going to grab that can upside down, essentially, with the tongs, so that you can easily, almost like a rainbow, you can flip it into the ice bath, because you're going to take that soda can and put the opening down. You want the top of the can to go into the ice bath. And when you do, it shrinks, like it collapses on itself so fast. And essentially, you're going to teach your kids about what happens to this group of people, these two groups especially, that because they have lost the help of the Spirit and they no longer are full, they no longer have something to hold them up. They don't have testimony anymore. They don't have a connection to God. They don't have covenants to tie them. They have severed themselves from all those options. They are hollow. And so when they experience hard things like battles, they collapse. They harden. Like if you tried to pull apart this can, you can't. It just gets harder and harder because it's collapsed in on itself. And that's kind of what you're going to want to talk about with personal apostasy. And then I would take some time to talk about how we guard against it. You can go in the notes and learn more, but this, I hope you just testify. Whether you're a teenager teaching your young women's class or, like your preschoorum, or if you're an adult teaching your own kids, I hope you'll talk about the things that really have helped you. Like what has helped you avoid that slide of apostasy, where you start to set down your beliefs in God and you set down your belief in a prophet, or you set down your belief of Joseph Smith. What causes that pull, and how do you guard against it? What things, like President Pace recommended scripture study? What else? Temple attendance or discipleship or service? What are things that really have made a difference for you? Testify about those things. And after your kids have seen the collapsed can crush a few times, they'll start to understand why it's so important to do those things in their life. They'll start to take some of your discipleship tips and apply it to their own life in ways that will help guard them against this kind of outcome. One of the very few things that I liked about COVID is that we called healthcare workers healthcare heroes. I know that was used pretty loosely, but I felt like that's essentially what people saw all of a sudden, where these healthcare workers had been doing these same jobs for us forever. All of a sudden during COVID, we saw them as heroic because the rest of us were terrified. And I just thought we all of a sudden appreciated the work that they do. And oftentimes, as I've been studying my scriptures, especially when it comes to helping people access the atonement of Jesus Christ, I really think what you do in those scenarios, in these missionary efforts, is what a healthcare worker does, especially somebody like a triage person, right? Somebody who is right at the beginning of an emergency room, for example. They don't care how you got there other than, knowing the details of what happened to you. They don't care if it was your own fault, if it was somebody else's fault. They simply want to help and heal. They want to get you from where you are to the place where you can find real help, whether it be a surgical room or a place where you can get rehydrated, or if you need meds. Like, they want to take you from where you are and funnel you towards relief. And honestly, that's what I feel like missionaries do all the time, but they do it mostly on a spiritual level. Lots of them do it service-wise, but you see both. That's what drew my mind to President Johnson's messages about Jesus Christ being relief. He is spiritual relief, and he is physical relief. And the work, especially of the Relief Society, is to bring that relief to others. So in my mind, when I picture the Relief Society women, I picture these women with armbands. Like, they are going out into the world in their own little spheres, and all they want to do is bring relief. They want to bring people physical relief. So we connect people to bishop storehouses, and we help people get the food and the water and the education that they need. We also connect people spiritually, right? We bring them into our wards. We connect them with missionaries. We help them know the bishop. We do all these things. I don't mean to isolate. I do think men and women participate in this massive relief effort, but I do love that this is something in particular that the General Relief Society presidency tackles. So that's where these printables come in. I created one that's just a simple armband, so that if you had a primary class or a young women's class, that you could teach what it means to have Jesus Christ be relief. In the verses, I direct you on either side of this heart. You'll see verses about Ammon and his brethren and how they tried to offer spiritual relief and physical relief to these new converted hearts. There's also 2 QR codes on the side where you can watch videos from President Johnson and her other presidency members talking about the different relief organizations. One of them is more of a global relief video, and one of them is more about how you can offer relief right here close by. But I actually kind of love that both of these videos focused on, it doesn't matter where you're providing relief. It doesn't have to be grand. Just start, just begin and offer the relief that only Jesus Christ can give. So that's kind of the idea behind the armband. For our kids, we thought it was more fun if I put these on their arms as tight as I could, and then we had a flexing competition so that we could see who could burst their armband the fastest. So if you need something for teenagers, you could definitely do that. But I also wanted something that you could give to others. So I created this little bandaid box, basically. It's sized to about the size of, you could probably fit, 20 or 30 band-aids in there if you wanted. But you could really just give 1 or 2. But the idea behind the box is that you could give this as something that they would then take home or give to their ministering families. I think it would be fun to talk about how Jesus Christ is relief to your ministering families and say that that's essentially what you are. You, as their ministering brother or sister, you're here to offer relief. Is there anything that you can do? Are there physical needs that you could help with? Are there spiritual needs? Are there questions that they have? Are there things that they're struggling with that you could help with? And then leave behind the box. Inside there's this little note card that you, in case you have to leave it behind to somebody you don't know yet, you could write something on the note. But having a whole box of Band-Aids on hand is something that everybody needs, right? It's like giving a Christmas neighbor gift that's AA batteries. It's something very useful that everybody wants. So that was my hope, is by making a Band-Aid box, it's something that they'll easily keep out and around. In fact, I made this, 2 days ago, when I first made the printable. Since I made it, we've used at least 6 of the Band-Aids inside. Jason cut off a part of his skin on his finger. Violet had an injury. Sam had an injury. So I'm telling you, having this box handy will remind them of the power of ministering. And hopefully it will remind them about you, that you as their ministering brother or sister can help. In fact, you're there to help. And you want to bring the relief that Jesus Christ offers in whatever form they need it. And I hope the box will help you. In my brain, I picture this, like you could do this as a whole ward, you guys. Like you could have a whole ministering Sunday and give everybody these boxes. You could have all the primary kids with their armbands. Like you could make this a big thing, or you could just do it in your own little family and find ways that you can offer Christ's relief and hopefully echo the words that President Johnson said. Because honestly, as I've been studying her words to make these printables and watching these videos and hearing her heart, I have a witness that she is exactly who she says she is. She is someone who represents Jesus Christ and hopes to do good in this world the way he would do it. And I believe that she does. And I hope to amplify her words a little bit by putting this printable out there. So I hope you put it to good use. That's it for week 28. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoy this week. You've got some phenomenal scriptures to study. They're very memorable, very visual verses, and then some really memorable object lessons. Anytime we bring in fire and can crushing, I feel like we're in for a really good week. So enjoy the object lessons this week. Just remember that if you need extra help, you can always go to 2 different sources. First, if you're part of the course, you can find all the notes. That's where I break down not just the insights chapter by chapter and almost verse by verse, but also all the creative. So if you're trying to figure out how you can teach these object lessons or adapt them to what you need, you can find those in the creative notes. That's part of the course. If you're not part of the course and subscriptions are not a good fit for you, you can also find the printables over in my Etsy shop. And on the instruction page of the printable, I always try to include how to teach the object lesson so that you're not rewatching the video 100 times. You can get the feel for it on the printables. So remember, you can find the links to those printables below this video. But otherwise, if you need extra help just studying the chapters, or you just want to be part of a really good conversation, I hope you'll join us on the live. So to do that, you need to go to gather.mechmom.com. That's a link you can find below. And then you're going to sign up as a free member. Just put your name and your email in, and then you'll get an alert. If you RSVP for the live, you'll get an alert that says we're going live. And then you can chat with other people in the course about this coming week of study and what's happening. I record it between Monday at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Mountain Time, but it's posted right afterwards, and you can view it literally anytime. Weeks from now, you can view the live. So anytime you happen to have a free hour, you can go on and see the more chapter by chapter approach to the same block of study. But between all those things, I think you've got a lot at your fingertips, and I hope you'll go out and study deeply and then teach powerfully. I think you've got a lot of great things to work with, so I hope you enjoy it. All right, you guys, enjoy this week, and I'll see you on Monday.